the Galactic fleet invaded human space. Then every star around them suddenly went dark. Admiral Vecthern of the Cindral Dominion stood on the bridge of the Ashvale Crown and watched 60,000 warships slide out of hyperspace into a system called Sol. For a moment, nobody spoke. The bridge crew simply stared at the tactical display. At the swollen red dot of a single yellow star surrounded by 8 planets and a scattering of debris that human sensors probably called junk, but which Cindral analysts had already flagged as 31 orbital shipyards. Position confirmed, said Lieutenant Ashra Vel, her 4 eyes flicking between displays. We are 11 light minutes from the human homeworld. No response from planetary defense grids, no launch signatures, no comms traffic at all. Vect allowed himself a thin smile. 3 years of borders, skirmishes, 3 years of watching this young, arrogant species push back Dominion scout fleets with a stubbornness that should have gotten them all killed, and now here he was, arriving with the largest invasion force the Cindral had assembled in 2 centuries. Humanity had ignored every warning, every ultimatum, every chance to kneel. "They're not even scared," muttered Commander Istravith beside him, his mandibles clicking with something between contempt and unease. "Or they don't know we're here yet." "They'll know soon enough," Vecht said. "Signal the fleet, begin the advance." That was when the first star went dark, 3 days earlier, aboard the human deep space listening post, Kestrel Watch somewhere past the orbit of Neptune. Commander Elena Reyes hadn't slept in 31 hours, and the coffee had stopped helping around hour 20. "Talk to me, Priya," she said, not looking up from the sensor feed. Lieutenant Priya Nair didn't look up either. Her fingers were a blur across the console, chasing a signal that kept trying to hide from her. "It's not one fleet, ma'am, it's the fleet. Cindral naval signatures, 60,000 hulls, mass profile consistent with their heavy dreadnought classes. ETA to Sol's 71 hours. Elena felt her stomach drop through the floor, but her voice stayed level. "That was the job. Confirm with Farsight Array before we wake anyone up." "Already confirmed." "Twice." Priya finally looked at her, and there was something naked and frightened in her eyes that Elena hadn't seen since the academy. "Commander, this isn't an incursion, this isn't a probe, this is everything they have." Elena exhaled slowly. Humanity had known this day was coming since first contact 8 years ago. Since the Cindral Dominion had looked at a species with 1/10 of their territory and 100th of their fleet tonnage, and decided the correct diplomatic posture was contempt. 3 years of border incidents, 3 years of final warnings that never seemed final. And now, apparently the real ultimatum had just arrived, 60,000 ships strong. "Send it up the chain," Elena said. "Every relay we've got, and Priya. Wake up the assembly." Nobody on Earth panicked, which surprised the humans almost as much as it would later surprise the Cindral. There had been panic once, 7 years ago, the first time a Dominion warship had strayed into the outer system, and humanity realized just how outmatched they were, in raw numbers. But 7 years is a long time, for a species that had once split the atom in a single decade, out of sheer stubbornness. 7 years was long enough to build something the Cindral Dominion, for all its scout ships and spies, had never quite managed to see. In an undisclosed facility beneath the Rockies, President Amara Solis stood before the Joint Defense Council with a message pad in her hand that felt heavier than it should. 71 hours, she repeated. "Do we have that long?" Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb, a broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples and the calm of someone who had already made peace with dying, for this, nodded once. 71 hours is more than enough, Madam President. We've had 3 years to prepare for exactly this number. And the array? Online in 48 hours if we push the last calibration teams. The Cindral will be inside our early warning perimeter, but still outside effective weapons range when it activates. Webb's jaw tightened. "This is the play, ma'am. There isn't another one." "Not against 60,000 hulls." Solis looked around the room. Generals, scientists, a Dominion linguist who had spent 3 years learning to hate the Cindral concept of acceptable losses, and Dr. Naomi Achebe, the astrophysicist whose team had spent a decade chasing a theory everyone else had called impossible. "Dr. Achebe," Solis said, "tell me again it will work." Naomi didn't smile. She wasn't the smiling type, not anymore. not after 10 years of career-ending ridicule from every physicist who'd told her that manipulating stellar plasma shielding at scale was a fantasy. It will work, Madam President, the only question is whether we can get it running before they're close enough to matter. Then let's find out, Solis said. Order the mobilization. Total blackout on all civilian broadcasts, all military bands. Everything, effective now. I don't want the Cindral to hear a single human voice until we want them to. The Cindral of course noticed the silence immediately, and it worried them more than they expected. No chatter at all, Istraveth reported as the fleet crossed the outer debris field. Not even encrypted noise. It's like the entire system went quiet the moment we entered hyperspace. Cordis, Vect said, though even he didn't sound entirely convinced, or they're saving their strength for a defense that won't matter. He wasn't wrong that humanity was saving something. He was wrong about what? For 2 days, the Cindral fleet advanced through Sol at a stately, contemptuous pace, expecting resistance that never came. No fighters scrambled, no orbital defense platforms opened fire. Scout drones reported Earth's cities lit and functioning, its populace apparently unaware or unbothered, which Vect found almost insulting. Did they not understand what was coming? Curious, Ashravel said on the second day, studying a burst of unusual radiation from a structure orbiting the fourth planet, Mars. Some kind of large-scale construction, human engineering signatures, but the design doesn't match anything in our archives. Analysts, inconclusive. It could be a shipyard, it could be a weapon, it could be nothing at all. Vect considered ordering a strike on it immediately. Something made him hesitate. Call it a war instinct honed over 40 years of campaigns, the same instinct that had kept him alive through the Threll Uprising and the border wars, the quiet animal certainty that something about this silence was wrong. He gave the order to continue the advance instead, weapons hot, formation tightened. That decision would save his life. It would not save his fleet. On Kestrel watch, Elena Reyes watched the Dominion formation crawl closer on the display and felt the 71 hours compress into something unbearably small. Talk to me, Naomi, she said over the comm, even though Naomi Achebe was 400 million kilometers away and probably hadn't slept any more than Elena had. 41 hours to full charge, Naomi's voice crackled back. We need 44. They'll be in effective weapons range of Earth in 36. A pause. Then we'll need to buy 3 hours somewhere, Elena. I don't have a way to make physics go faster. Elena closed her eyes. 3 hours. 3 hours against 60,000 warships, and the only asset humanity had that could buy that time was itself expendable, fragile, and human. I know someone who might, she said. Captain Jonah Reyes, Elena's brother, and the reason half the listening post staff pretended not to notice how carefully she avoided saying his name on open channels. Commanded the 9th Vanguard Squadron. 40 ships against 60,000, armed with weapons the Cindral had never seen, running a plan that had a survival probability so low the tacticians had stopped writing it down as a number and started writing it as a joke nobody laughed at. They call it the Ashvale Crown, Jonah said to his crew, looking at the image of Vect's flagship on the display. 60,000 ships think that name means something. Let's make sure it means something different by the time we're done. His executive officer, a quiet Kenyan engineer named David Otieno, who had built half the Vanguard stealth systems with his own hands, didn't smile either, but something in his shoulders eased. You really think 40 ships can hold a line against that? No, Jonah said honestly. I think 40 ships can make them flinch. Flinching costs time. Time is all we need. The ambush came from angles the Cindral sensor doctrine hadn't accounted for. Close, fast, and utterly without the caution of a fleet that expected to win. 40 human ships dropped their stealth fields inside point-blank range of the Dominion Vanguard and opened fire with weapons that shredded Cindral shielding as if it were paper. It wasn't overwhelming force, it was precision, desperation, and 3 years of studying exactly how Cindral defensive doctrine worked, and exactly where it didn't. Report. Vect barked as alarms shrieked across the Ashvale Crown. We've lost 11 ships in the first exchange, Istraveth said, disbelief thick in his voice. 11, Admiral. From 40 vessels. It should have been impossible. It should have been a footnote, a minor irritation crushed in seconds by weight of numbers. Instead, the Ninth Vanguard danced through the Dominion formation like a blade through smoke, buying every minute they could. At a cost, Jonah refused to let himself calculate. They lost 19 ships, they bought 4 hours, it was enough. Naomi Achebe's voice, when it finally came over every military channel in the system, was steady in a way that made Elena's throat tighten. Array is live, Naomi said. Solar Shepherd network engaged across all 8 planetary defense stations. God help us, what the Cindral Dominion had never understood about humanity. What no species that measured strength purely in hull tonnage ever seemed to grasp, was that humans did not need to outbuild an enemy fleet if they could simply take away the enemy's ability to see. The technology Naomi's team had spent a decade perfecting didn't destroy ships. It didn't need to. It selectively dampened stellar output across a precisely bounded volume of space, wrapping every star within the affected radius in a controlled magnetic shroud that swallowed visible light, most sensor bands, and every targeting system the Cindral Dominion had ever built. Every star around the invading fleet went dark, not from destruction, but from a species that had learned to dim the sun itself, rather than let an enemy read the battlefield. On the Ash Vale Crown, the bridge fell into true darkness for the first time in Vect Thurn's 40-year career. "Report," he shouted, and for the first time, no one answered immediately, because no one had an answer. "Sensors are blind." Ashra Vel finally said, her voice thin with something close to fear. "All bands, visual, thermal, gravitic, everything, Admiral, the star itself has gone dark." "That's impossible." "I know, sir, it's happening anyway." In the sudden blindness, 60,000 Dominion warships that had built an empire on overwhelming, visible force discovered they were no longer the largest thing in the room. They were simply the thing that could no longer see the room at all. And, in that darkness, human ships equipped with technology built specifically to operate blind, using targeting solutions, calculated in advance, and confirmed by short-burst quantum-linked drones that needed no light to function, began to fire. It was not a massacre. Humanity had never wanted a massacre. It was, Admiral Vecht would later admit in the surrender proceedings, something worse for a warrior culture built on the assumption of visible dominance. It was a lesson. The Dominion fleet limped out of Sol 31 hours later, having lost a third of its ships and all of its certainty, its scouts and its contempt. Vect Thurn stood before Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb, aboard a human cruiser, the first Cindral commander in history to personally negotiate a ceasefire rather than delegate it to a lesser officer. Because he needed to understand, with his own eyes, what species he had just failed to conquer. "You dimmed a star," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. "We didn't destroy anything you couldn't get back, Admiral," Webb said. "We just made sure that for one day, in one system, you couldn't see anything we didn't want you to see. That's the whole trick. We never had to be bigger than you, we just had to make sure that when it mattered, you were blind and we weren't." Vecht was quiet for a long moment. Then, in the flat, formal cadence of Cindral high diplomacy, he said words that had not been spoken by a Dominion admiral in 200 years of expansion. "Then let it be known among the Dominion that Sol is not a system to be taken. It is a system to be respected." Behind him, 60,000 ships had come to conquer a species the Cindral Dominion had called primitive. They left having learned that the deepest darkness in the galaxy is not the void between the stars. It is the moment a species discovers, too late, that it was never as safe as it believed. And that somewhere in the dark, humanity had been quietly, patiently, learning how to turn out the lights.